Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Today, trying something different again. I invited Derek from Perpetual Education. So he kind of created a coding bootcamp that's pretty unique. And this is kind of the reason why I wanted to bring him on, but it has a track called Design for the Web, and we're going to elaborate on what that is later. But I'm going to dive into this coding bootcamp and, let Derek give a little bit of an introduction. But, Derek, you and I have talked back and forth a little bit. I think what you're doing is interesting, but welcome and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name's Derek Wood. I go by Sheriff Derek on the internet for who knows what reason. It was just not taken everywhere. So, I kind of got coverage on that. Not really that much of a backstory. Anyway, I grew up in San Diego, kind of went to a bunch of interesting schools. My mom was always trying to find like the more edgy or interest school. So I always went to kind of like just sort of like an interesting sort of like ex-Montessori, ex-Waldorf type of collection of teachers, and got really lucky with a bunch of interesting schools down there. And then later on, I kind of went to some art high school, sort of like art magnet high school. And then I went to college. I thought I wanted to be an illustrator, but it turns out I didn't really want to draw that much or put in like the time and effort to be an illustrator. But having that time in art school gave me just a lot of time to like contemplate and, be selfish and think about art and try a bunch of things. Ended up getting kind of into music, doing like some pop art, some paintings, and eventually kind of found myself in this class that, I guess through music, like MIDI keyboards and stuff sort of felt a little programmy, and we were connecting these lights to these songs we were making. So we had these funny like backgrounds. That was my first like really codey type of thing with Max MSP. And I had been doing like a little bit of Flash stuff, but I had even told my at the time, HTML, that stuff's dead. It was in like 2000. And so I was wrong about that. But later on in life, like around 2010, I had been making websites and stuff for my friends. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I would like, pimp out somebody's MySpace page or change some stuff or try to use Dreamweaver. And it was just always a nightmare. Every time you wanted to change a menu, you had to go to a page and change, copy and paste. In 2010, my girlfriend at the time was a visual designer, and I could tell that the like print manuals and the different things she was doing, like catalog work, wasn't going to be the same. And so I told her, you should really learn web development or be able to make your own websites. And she said, no way, not doing that. And so I just started looking into it and being like, I should just really learn how this works. I could show her how to do it. And so I did that. And now she's a successful web developer and designer. But I didn't ever stop, because it was just really fun. It was like a new video game for me. And even though I kind of started really in, when I was 28 or 29, I don't know, it just kind of took over my life. And I decided that I was going to not focus on playing in bands for a while and just really kind of carve out a career in web development.
Awesome. Okay. And so, when you reached out to me, when I took a look at your website, you have quite a few interesting pitches, and we'll get to that in a bit. But you know what? I'm not gonna spoil this. Before we do, why don't you go ahead and give a little bit of an introduction to your program? Like what's it about? What makes it unique compared to other coding programs?
So it certainly was never my intention to like create a school or a coding boot camp. And I guess the inspiration from it was really like Stack Overflow, answering questions on there, just hearing so many different questions and answers over the years. And you can look back at my first Stack Overflow questions. They're pretty funny, but really understanding like, how do you ask a question? Asking a question like, hey, my site is broken, or hey, I want it to go right and it doesn't. And then you look at the code and there's 10 layers of framework in there, and it's hard to answer the question and actually make it worth their time and my time, because I really have to explain, well, that element's an inline block level element by default. And so you can't put a margin on it. So that's why you put a negative 200 margin on this other thing next to it, which, it's not the cascade the way it's supposed to be. It's like the dominoes of hell. And so how do you undo that And then, through different Slack channels and Discords and teaching people and working with people. And I worked at, small shops, medium-sized shops, like a corporate gig, consulting, contracting, like freelancing. I felt like kind of the pain and measure of all of the different little things you could get into. And at each one of those jobs, it was just kind of apparent that everybody on the team had just such wildly different skill sets. Some people can sit down and write a whole Django app when they've never used Python before. Just that's their mindset. But then they wouldn't notice that the button doesn't work. Or another person is really good at WordPress and has kind of memorized all of the loops and stuff, but when it comes down to it, doesn't know PHP. And I don't think it's like just necessarily fully ego, but I think the way that this industry works, where everybody is sort of forced to go learn by themselves and try not to get embarrassed and don't ask the wrong question. And it creates this sort of secrecy where you ask somebody a question and then they run back to their office and look it up for a while, and come back with the answer instead of like an open dialogue where we can all learn together. And really, I think I was just lonely. I mean, I couldn't find anybody to talk about code. Like a lot of my friends are artists and musicians, and they almost don't even understand what it is, or, just at a surface level, they think it's kind of weird. Like, why would you even be like, it's almost like this corporate thing, or like, ooh, web developers, that's about like money or something. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, all the people I talk to are turned off by it. I'm at a barbecue and someone says, I don't like to talk about work. When I finally meet somebody who knows to program, they won't talk to me about it. And even when I go to meetups, it's like, the person who's programming the TVs for the like airplane TVs, like they're doing one type of programming, and another person is doing this huge architecture project, and another person is doing this thing, and they can't do anything without Bootstrap. And I'll go in there and say, let's talk about this. Like, what about, animations that are created by data-driven views or something? And everybody's like, why would you want to do that? And so I don't know, somewhere in all of this, like I'm trying to teach people and help people. I spend hours a day just like helping people, and for, no good reason. It's probably not very smart of me to do it, but I learn much from them through Discord and everything. I run this like little CSS Discord. And I don't know, I guess this school was just like, I want to teach people to have a shared foundation to get in the industry and be able to understand what the user experience people are doing, or understand what the visual designer is doing. There's no reason why a programmer can't understand that like having text that spans a whole 1600 pixels of a page doesn't make sense. Like doesn't look, you can't read it. You need to be able to break things up into chunks. You need to be able to understand line height, like a little bit of typography. And then the visual designers, you can't be a visual designer if you don't understand the box model. Like you just should not be allowed to work in a medium if you refuse to understand it at all. And I don't know. Then on the other hand, like looking at it from a business perspective, like I can sit with the client and understand what the thing is. Okay, they got projects. Each project has some dates and possibly a location. Those hook together. I mean, I can like write up the data structure for that, like just while I'm talking to them, and probably get like a pretty decent layout in a code pen by the end of the meeting. Like the real work isn't labor, like the typing. If we keep hiring people to type, they are not going to have jobs in the future, I don't think. So really being able to prototype, make something that works, show it to people, get feedback, adjust, get feedback. And I really like pair programming. I just think you could pay more people to have more fun, to make better products that isn't a waterfall system. And nobody understands it. Like some people understand it, but they can't afford it to take the time to let it like soak in. One of the last companies I worked at, they were really positive about all these ideas, but they also had a huge workflow coming in, big giant movie companies and stuff. So they can't just change the waterfall technique because Derek feels like it. And, or it would take years. So I don't know. I just want to teach people to like have this core foundation so that then we can work on some more advanced topics where I know everybody has the same core knowledge. I don't have to guess. If one of them has been winging it for a long time and doesn't really know how to write HTML, certainly doesn't know what accessibility is and all of those things. Like, why not learn about empathy and compassion and GTP and how the internet works and just like security and all those things like at the beginning, instead of tacking on SEO at the end after we've made this big mess with all this tech debt. But I'll stop there because I could talk about it forever and we just You need to time box those things.
I love it. So, I mean, that's what's really interesting is you are basically teaching, you're almost you're trying to connect designers and developers, and not necessarily connect them, but you're trying to get developers to have kind of more of a design UX user-focused mindset. And you want developers to care about that. You want designers to also, I think you mentioned the position of like a visual designer. You wanted them to know the box model. Does that sound correct? Mm-hmm. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, it sounds like you're trying to get these positions to be a little bit more versatile and understand that like the fundamentals that they should learn probably spread a little bit further than what other programs are kind of teaching. And like you said, I almost feel like these positions are very like boxed in and they're not willing to expand and they get stuck in their ways. And you even mentioned this idea of like, I thought it was interesting. Like not every company can go off the waterfall method. And I think a lot of like developers that are coming into new positions that are being spit out by coding boot camps, like sometimes they get instilled with this mindset of this, like, this iterative way of thinking, like we need to like get past this waterfall method. We need to expand on it. Like as soon as I come in, like, why are we doing this? I need to change this. I need to push this change in this company. It's like, you need to understand why this company's there. And I think a lot of developers are really, they're very energetic and passionate about like this industry. They're excited and that's good. They need to bring that energy into it. It's going to go a long way, but there's some cons to that as well, and things they should be aware of when they go into this industry. So I think that's really interesting. Well,
I mean, just to point to that point, I'm aware of that. And I try to use my experience to help them understand that, because that's been me at a lot of jobs, poor bosses of mine a few times. I'm there, I'm writing up all these new ways we're going to do some things. And I'm, spending too much time on R&D, and they're like, but we just need this stuff done. And so I've been there. I have a little bit of shame in my history of that. So when I do teach them this stuff, I really don't want to spoil them in that you're only going to work on greenfield projects. You're only going to work on this. Like, I mean, our website specifically has a bunch of problems, and I leave a bunch of stuff like all messed up because I'm going to make them go in and fix it. And, it's like a WordPress project on purpose. Like there's lots of reasons. So yeah, I'm telling them that, but I'm also letting them know you're going to be working on legacy code. You're going to have to work on a team. Like you're not going to just get everything the way that you want it. It's not going to be, the happy path.
I like it. That's a good mindset to instill. Absolutely. So we're going to get into this a little bit later, but, I made this statement, and like I said, we'll talk about this later, but it feels like you are really like training designers to be able to code rather than coders to be able to design. And that's where like your curriculum, at least how your landing page and talking with you, that's kind of how it sells the program, at least from my perspective. So, I gave you a heads up. I'm going to ask this question because I'm terrible at design. I'm terrible at UX. I'm trying to get better slowly, but quite frankly, like with a lot of designs that I need to implement, like I'm just outsourcing it. That's how terrible I am.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with admitting I'm weak with that. But, like what's so attractive about your program is it definitely like it's a mix between design and code. And so that, I love coding and being able to kind of like slowly move from coding more into design to supplement that. Like that's a long-term goal for me. So if I wanted to join your program, like I'm weaker at design, I know how to code. I want to get a lot better at design. I want to meld those two to become, like this all around developer that can produce something from, this idea, this concept without too much user research in the beginning where I still have to do that, into, like delivering myself prototypes, so that I can, or mock-ups so that I can code these out. If I wanted to go into your program with this goal, feel free to, keep this short, but like, how would I go about doing that? How would your program help me do that? Because you have a very unique, flexible program that adapts to people. That's what you try to do. So yeah, how would your program help me do that?
Let me just frame that one out there to cover the previous question a little too, because what you're saying reflects really what a lot of people are thinking, which is that there are coders and that there are designers. or, as I've been joking, like coders and creatives. And to me, those two forces are at odds when I'm trying to really just envision that as they are both designers. The developer has its name for whatever reason. I mean, aren't we all developing things? I mean, programmers get weird. Like, I wish VAR was a different word. But so in general, I'm just saying you're a designer. Like, you design a little system of documents that make the thing happen. I mean, you make choices, how you design a function, like what properties are we going to use in this object? How is this API going to work? You are a designer. And the visual designer they're really designing, or should be designing, a visual language. How do these two fonts kind of play off each other? How do I make areas that are comfortable to read and areas that grab my attention? How do I break up the page so that the user doesn't feel overwhelmed? How do I make some colors to kind of represent the brand? Does the brand need to be, do they want to feel bold and new? Do they want to excite the user? And these things are like the core to design. You need to have a set of goals, and that's like really what we're huge on. Like, if you don't write down the explicit goal, you can't have a design because you can't measure it. So if the design, you can't be like, oh, I just really love orange. The Red Bull did it, and then this other company did it, and the creative director really likes this site, so we're going to just make it look like that site. That's not really design. That is production art. You're creating a thing that you think you want. You didn't ask anybody. You didn't see if it worked. And then you tell a developer to go and implement it. And to me, that's not a design process. We're creating the same website over and over again. Sure, there are conventions like a sign-in button that, it's nice to have it in the top right. But I feel like we should start each project as if we're there for the first time. Now, to answer your question, as a developer of your skill level, you'd have to take quite the leap of faith, and we'd have to talk about it, and I'd have to adjust a lot of the curriculum for you, so that when I'm telling people we're learning about a JavaScript loop, for 2 days straight, so that it's burned into their brain for life, I might make you do something like 4 times harder, but that has the same, gets the same point across. Like, the whole internet is lists of lists of lists of lists, and then you filter them or delete them or save them. I mean, it's at the core center of it. It's the fundamental things are pretty simple. Layout is usually a box with 2 boxes in it that are aligned. If you do that for 3 days straight, you will never wonder about CSS ever again. Or you can do it for 10 years and never understand CSS. It's up to you. I don't know why you'd choose the second one. But for you, we just first week, we're doing all this work-life balance stuff. We're talking about this clock, this time timer, right? You can, they use it in the book Sprint. But being able to set time timer and then say, I'm going to spend 30 minutes on this thing, and that's it. That's some work-life balance. And being able to, how do you do visual design? Like, for example, here is a book, a collection of things that I like. Here's a bunch of books that I found on the internet, book covers that I like. Start collecting a little Google Drive folder and anytime you see something you like, snap it, put it in there. Look over it once a week, that sort of thing. Because, and then also, you're talking about visual design. We're around a corner, change a font, change a color. Yeah, those things are useful. But if you back up to what is the goal of this page, what do we want to have happen here? What elements can make that happen? Do we want it to be sparse? Do we want the user to just get here and then just read that word and not really feel anything? Or do we want them to feel this kind of biophilia effect of all of this rich rainforest, or, like the Apple desktops? They want you to feel like you're in this big cathedral or something. Or do you want it to be hacker, And so if you start to think about what the user or, your visitor, your friend on the other end, what you want them to help understand and experience and how you want them to feel, then you're not caught in is my design good or not? You're caught in, does choice help me do that? Does the recruiter really want to see my portfolio site look like a terminal? Is that really what, it's cool. I think it's cool to look at, I love all the bootcamp graduates and their interesting portfolios. But if you're I don't want to feel like I just so I'm just saying that there's goals, and that is the core of design. If you can write down the goals explicitly, you start to create a new framework for decision making. And that goes the same for programming as it does for visual design. And it takes time to get used to it. I'm not even very good at visual design. I mean, I'm trying my best, but the reason why it works is because I am able to focus and I'm able to make some decisions like this is legible enough, but I'm also wearing a lot of hats. I mean, I don't have a design team. I don't have a programming team. Like this is like a 2-person company. Like if you've ever seen something written, code or words or video editing, we did that. So I have to kind of split my time as far as, my whole goal wasn't to make the best looking website in the whole world. I would love to spend a year just fooling around with fonts and colors and Illustrator. And maybe I'll get to do that soon in the near future. But that's what I would do for a programmer is try to reset your brain and reorganize what that even means. Like what does design mean and how do we make the goals and how do we get comfortable with figuring out how to measure our choices and do those work, which goes to visual designers is instead of just thinking, I need the client to like this, so my boss will have a relief and then I can relax and not feel on the spot and my ego will feel nice. That's how too much of the industry is. When you can sell your work and when you really learn to say, you wanted this feeling, this feeling, this feeling. We wanted them to feel comfortable doing this. And we wanted them to send us this other thing. And these 10 things we tested, these 4 things worked. Here's where we came. The design is self-evident. It's not about your emotions. It's not about what your husband thinks or, somebody, whoever works at the company. That's just not what it's about. And if we can start teaching the clients that, they're going to get higher quality outcomes for less money. And it'll be more fun.
I wish I had gotten this mindset because you even started with this idea of why do coding bootcamps teach, security and they teach SEO later? And, before I even went to my coding bootcamp, this concept of content driven design and coming up with all these things, SEO is, in my opinion, when you're thinking of content, you're also thinking of SEO as early as possible. And these things do kind of get tacked on as side modules, after you almost had finished the coding boot camp. And it feels like even the way you were describing how you tackle my situation, it feels like a path that I wish I had gone down and learned that type of coding early, just kind of with the type of entrepreneur I am, the type of apps that I like to build. And I would always because I am always someone that would I try to get involved in all the UX and design conversations, and they're like, Don, get out. You're not doing this. But I would kind of poke my head in. I would talk to the designer, and I'd just because I love talking about it. And overall, I think one thing I've realized is a lot of designers appreciate developers that want to know more about that. They appreciate developers that want to be more involved. And like you said, even the concept of a developer, so I'll say a coder, whatever you want to label me as. But, this, I think I think it would be a really interesting aspect. Now, my question to you, this is a new question from what you said, if someone like me came into the program, you said I'd pretty much have to change your curriculum, right? I wouldn't be the traditional student. Do you feel because I could hear you trying to think of ways to include me in and try to create a flexible plan for me. Do you feel like your program at some point might be too flexible? You're kind of, putting yourself in all these different areas, trying to make all these different students happy with different backgrounds and different goals. Do you feel like you're too stretched sometimes, or that could become a possibility?
Anything could become a possibility, that's for sure. And the course itself is its own design problem that we're constantly getting to work on, that's why it's so fun. But I think that the way that the course is built is that each day there's one lesson that usually covers one or maybe 2 core concepts. And I think that even a seasoned developer, cloud architect master would be surprised how much they learn because, for example, in this one of the first weeks, we go through and there's all this heady stuff, how would you describe a dog or a mug and get really detailed. And, they start learning about, I guess it has a width and they struggle. It's hard because what we're doing is rethinking how our brain works. The computer isn't that, big props to all the people who built computers. But if you break it down into what it is, it's just a million key value pairs and like on and off switches. So if you can break down what is a dog and you start to say it has legs, how many? Oh, 4. Okay. I mean, your baby talking to the computer, it can run. What does run mean? How can I give this information to the computer in the most simple way that it can do its job, but that we have the smallest communication needed to do it? And so you uncover numbers and words. You can't times dog by dog, or Philip by Philip, but you can times 2 by 2. So that's an interesting. You start thinking as somebody who would create a language. Well, what is this little run thing? I mean, he might run different at different times. So you see, they have to draw out these drawings, and they're so fun, and they're all nervous, and some people are better at drawing than others, but everyone together, seeing their drawings together is the outcome. Like they did it perfectly. And so you might start thinking about something totally different that way. That might spark something that, because of your knowledge, you're like, wow, I could make a CMS that's actually just a JSON object. And then all of a sudden it does this, it creates all of the things. Like, why isn't that a thing, by the way? Or, hey, why are we making this authorization service over and over and over and over and over again? So I think that everybody has the ability to be inspired at every point of the way, but I can see how it comes off sort of wishy-washy. But the video is distilled down so that I don't have to say that part over and over again. And then I'm able to just weave in a little and say like, hey, this fits into what you're talking about with like you're a radio DJ. Here's a cool company you could work for, and think about what that is, like what is streaming. Use that for your next project. So the project has a frame to it, but you can dress it up however you want. And my job is to just sort of connect the dots with the different people. And it also, you'll learn from them, they'll learn from you. I think the students really end up doing the teachings. I mean, I organize the place for the learning to happen. I can't learn it for you. I can't just hand you the knowledge. I can show you how to right click in the settings panel, but that's not design. That's just, configuration. So I don't know. I just think being able to build something and then decorate it and then work on it. So you have a prototype that's starting out, and then you work to make it visually pleasing together all at the same time, and using style tiles and things instead of high fidelity finished mock-ups is like the way to go. And if everyone's doing that together, they're all going to come out with very interesting and different portfolios. But I don't know how it's going to scale. Like, I don't even know if I want it to scale. That's the thing. I don't even know, I don't think of us as a boot camp. I think of us as like a mentorship experiment that hopefully like ends up in some kind of larger scale, like design guild of people who have like a deep understanding of like the respect and the responsibility for what we like put into the world.
Yeah. And that's interesting that you just said that. You don't really think of yourself as a coding boot camp. The more I talk with you, neither do I. That's not a bad thing. We all have, or there are so many coding boot camps that are all kind of trying to do the same thing. And they're basically trying to prepare you for this traditional coder role. And that's just not your coding boot camp. And, we're going to elaborate on this a little bit, but as I told you before this, it feels like you are teaching designers how to code. You're not really teaching coders how to design. It's more on like emphasizing the design and the fundamental process of like getting this idea up in. I see you making a face right now. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I feel like what we're doing is we are training designers, and on the way, we're focusing on the web as our medium. Now, if I could teach you one thing about the web so that by the end of today, you could make something meaningful, I would probably teach you about typography and HTML. But HTML is really a JavaScript object. So would I do that? But I wouldn't want to teach you one day. It wouldn't be worth it to me. I want to teach you the full 6 months. So I organize it in a way that the tools become apparent as necessary. There's no point in teaching about Git or NPM. Like a lot of the other schools, they need those technologies because their school is built on them. They've built out these kind of gamified, applications and different automated testing scenarios, so that you basically have to try to learn the full stack of whatever, some like Angular full stack thing right out the gate just to be able to participate. I don't think that makes much sense. Like, I'd rather somebody be able to make a accessible, Lighthouse 100 type of website that said who they are and how to contact me, instead of just throw them into a gigantic like bowl of spaghetti. And so to say that we are teaching visual designers how to code a little, or no, what did you say? How to
teaching? I feel like teaching designers how to. It feels like you are more focused and emphasize teaching designers how to code, like kind of like instilling a kind of a UX design fundamentals before you even dive into code, versus coders how to design. The emphasis seems to be on the design.
I feel like I feel like they're equal. I mean, I guess that's the best way I could say it. I feel like there's going to be people, I've already seen people kind of starting to figure out where they're going to fit in, and they might not be as hardcore programmers. But I know that some of the people, like when we get further on, when we get through all the JavaScript fundamentals, when we're able to make small apps and prototypes, they're going to want to take those next steps, and they're going to want to build out fully fleshed out projects, at least MVPs, or go work at companies, and they'll start their journey from there, and they'll have such a solid foundation and everything that when it's time to go learn a new language or a new framework, they won't have to think, oh, how am I going to learn this language or framework? They'll think, oh, I need a list of stuff. What do they call a list in this language? Oh, how do I show the list? The core concepts they're like Legos, or like building blocks. And I just think that instead of feeling like you memorized Angular 1.5 and now it's like Angular 8 and who knows what's happening. What happened? All of my knowledge was thrown in the trash and I have to rememorize the shape of these directive objects. That's not good. I don't like it. I hate it. And I think that's why I probably have stayed at my own core for developing, because I keep going back. I want to be able to learn it like I could teach it all the way, kind of like that Feinberg method, or I think that's what it's called. But, I don't want to memorize a bunch of stuff and then realize I need to update NPM and lose everything. It just breaks my heart. I want to understand how to build lean web applications, and really, we're in a golden age right now. JavaScript is amazing. CSS and HTML are amazing. It's like you don't have to do any hacks or anything anymore. It's the golden age to learn how to use these tools. And it's not even it's like the Internet of Things. We're going to be building, all sorts of stuff that just runs on things. You're going to be able to make fun little clocks and stuff that's connected. And, with that comes a lot of danger. But we have the ability to use these tools and new things like Svelte and all these different types of programming stuff to do so many things.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good. I think that's a really good description of it. So let's dive into the details a little bit, because I think when you talk about a lot of these concepts, it definitely sometimes feels a little abstract. And even when I look at your program, I think that's one hard thing that that's a challenge you're gonna have to tackle. Is it sounds like it's focused on instilling this creative mindset into people, this more creative mindset. And you really link that creative mindset into the fundamentals that a lot of coders should be learning, before they dive into all these complex frameworks. And I completely get that. I agree with that. But it also, when you describe even how I would come into your program and be successful in it, it still sounds so abstract. Mm-hmm. And even when I was looking at your website, it sounds good. It's something different. It's teaching fundamentals that a lot of coding boot camps don't teach. And it's building out wholesome developers that can do a lot of different things and have their hands in a lot of different pots. But it's still, I think that's going to be a challenge selling that and figuring out and like you said, you're still new and you're still figuring out who your audience is and who's mm-hmm. kind of coming in. And so, thankfully you can be really flexible. You're not this bloated coding boot camp, and you're obviously data driven, and you care about analyzing how your program goes. We talked about this before, you really love kind of being this you had a better word for it, but kind of like this curriculum developer, this course developer. You like refining a lot of that. What was the word you used to describe that?
I guess at each stage of my career, I feel like most people should probably stay in a career for 4 years, but I kind of switch every year and a half. And I was joking around that my latest job title is like career designer. I'm designing these students the career that they want, and I'm giving them the tools they need to do it. And so what it comes down to is like, I'm a web developer. I do develop websites and I do the design, but at this point I'm like designing the curriculum and the space to get these people where they want to go. We know what their dreams are. We know what their situation is. We know what their fears are. So those are the like research and the information. And then I use all of these tools to like create that outcome. I just think that's funny because like that I'm like a designer of an outcome, a successful outcome for this person.
Okay. Yeah, you describe it way better than I can. Let's dive into a couple details, things that kind of caught my eye. So you mentioned that like you don't teach proprietary tools like React, but then like later in the landing page, you go on to say that you're teaching advanced frameworks like Vue or Ember.
Yeah.
So that confuses me.
Okay.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. And just picking up on what you were saying before, it's like the syllabus, like there's actually a syllabus on the homepage, but I tried to write it, and Ivy and the other people, we all looked at it and tried to make it so that if you didn't know anything about programming, you could read it. I didn't say, outline what hypertext markup language is, but I first talk about content strategy and then being able to, I forget how I said it, but it's like can seem fluffy to some people and they're like, but what are we going to learn? And I'm like, it's all right there. Like you just have to take it seriously. Like that's like the order of learning. Like it just follows exactly like the calendar. But so we go and we learn how to use Google Docs and stuff early on because we use the history of the internet basically. And I just teach the most important thing each day. That is the next most important thing. So why did we make the internet? Well, I don't know. What were they? Microsoft Word docs or something, and they wanted to share them. And so we can use Google Docs as an example of that now. They can build out sort of an essay, remember how that was in school, like headline, thesis statement, heading level 2, and they can start to think about that. And that sort of turns into this whole, how would you program that? And then that leads into HTML, and that leads into sort of like a business card website, which is simple, gets the job done. It's better to have a nice little business card website than a giant website that doesn't do its job and is a big pain. And then you kind of move into like brochure websites, things that have a couple more pages, restaurants or something. And we just actually find real clients. So we're making a website for this musician guy right now. And so that is where where do you hit the wall there? Like, when is HTML not enough? So then you got to then you're like, I just really wish I could put this header in one file. And then you're like, well, let's listen to how PHP kind of got developed and why. There's that story. How much stuff can you do with PHP? Now I need to save something. Like now we're kind of in Web 2.0 world. Like, what if we need somebody to set up a hair appointment? How does that work? Where do we send it to? Do we send it to a database? Do we hook up Twilio and send it right to their phone? Who knows? But we haven't talked about JavaScript yet because we don't talk about it for way a long time because it's the least important part. Then we do learn JavaScript in extreme detail, but now you have this whole conflict. Where's the server-side rendering helping? What's it doing really well? Where's the JavaScript helping? What's it doing really well? Should we load the page with the list and then have jQuery or whatever, we don't use jQuery, but we that's how they used to do it. But you want to have JavaScript, regular vanilla JavaScript, check the page and then rebuild it when anybody filters it. So it still has the server-side rendering quality, but you have this added layer of progressive enhancement. So there's that. When does JavaScript get to be a pain? How many to-do lists can you create on top of each other until you're just And then you could talk about Vue a little bit, because I think Vue is adorable and it's very fun to use, and it's basically exactly like Angular 1.5. So historically, you can see how that worked. Oh, okay, we're able to add a few little attributes here and create this sort of templatization that's different than string templates in JavaScript, where you have to have a function. It's just not as composable. It's not as like fun to look at. I mean, personally, I'm still on the like JavaScript, CSS, and HTML in different files type of thing. But we'll talk about React a little bit too. And so, but at some point, Vue, it's a nightmare. Like as soon as you're out of a code pen, as far as I'm concerned, it's a nightmare. Like I would never want to pick up somebody's like 2-year-old Vue project. So you got to talk about something. And I don't know if I really want to talk about Rails. So that's why I talk about Ember, because it's basically like all based on Rails conventions anyways. And you don't have to build a huge, gigantic Ember project to start to see, oh, how does this framework work? You know, it's not WordPress. It's not, you know, Vue, but it has everything in there. And how do I connect that to a backend API? Then you're getting like the full stack. And I consider the full stack to be the research, the content strategy, the measuring, the testing, the prototyping. Like at this point, you've been able to make a prototype in a code pen before you make the Ember application. Anyway, you can spin up an Ember application and go like, Ember, generate route this, generate route, hook it all together, throw in some params, and then you understand like the majority of how this stuff works. You know, but then Ember has to go ahead and like have all their tutorials sneak in some TypeScript, which is another problem. It's like everyone's always one step ahead and it's hard to teach that way. Like it's hard to learn Koa but Koa with this extra EJS syntax thing, and then also Ember, but half of the things are written in TypeScript. And it's, you know, so I'm just trying to stay away from that stuff. I'm trying to only teach the like things that will not change, and then experiment with the things that are a little more ephemeral and give them those opportunities. Last thing about that is the section down there that says advanced frameworks. Instead of buying a tiny yacht with all the money we're getting here, if we wanted to make money, we would have done it a lot differently. What we want to do is take the money and put it into like advanced courses and then have those grandfathered in for our students so that it kind of follows you with your career. It's basically like we'll have our own front-end masters. And so we're able to teach faster because we know everything everybody knows already. There's never anything taken for granted. Every subsequent class is based on the core foundation that we've already taught. And that way we can like speed through stuff and, you know, not waste people's time. Because I've wasted, you know, thousands of hours on tutorials that I shouldn't have taken.
I think all of us have. Do you feel like these advanced frameworks would come up in a more advanced class that you would implement down the road?
I'm flirting with there's like sections of the course that are, or most of the course is like set in stone kind of, and then there's these holes where like maybe like this week I'm going to throw up a video that I actually video the classes, you know, what they've done. So kind of like a little critique video. That would be different for every class, right? And so as we get into like the 5th and 6th months, there's sort of like project week or something. And it really depends. Like I have a Arduino over here and a Raspberry Pi. Like I'm kind of interested in doing, you know, maybe a project with that, a little Internet of Things type of stuff. Just recently, I'm kind of flirting with thinking about doing a couple things with Svelte. That's kind of piqued my interest after listening to some of that guy's talks. But it's going to depend. I also think that around the 4th or 5th month, some people are going to realize they don't want to know that stuff. They don't want to know DevOps. They don't want to get into like Azure or whatever, Heroku and all these companies and stuff. So I think that, I don't know, I think I would be really happy if people just built killer code pens. And I think that like, if you have a portfolio with 6 really cool code pens and a little story about like how you went through the process and did your research and what you came through with and what you learned, I think that would just destroy any of these like other, and I'm not trying to like blow any of the other students out of the water or anything, but I'm just saying that as somebody who's hired people, I want to hear your thought process. I don't want to see the same 6 little projects that just show me, you know, how to, when you go to a job, they're never going to have a junior developer just go in and like set up the whole like CI pipeline. That, you know what I mean? They're not going to say welcome. So here's your computer, and we just need you to set up authorization. So set up Ruby and download a few of the packages and get it all set up, because we're going to trust you for our entire company to sit on top of this thing you're going to do today. Like, people have the wrong assumption that they're going to go to work and just code apps all day. But really, I spent like weeks working on like a little part of a menu. Like, how are we going to do this? Like, I mean, this is going to be seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Little things matter, like building a custom slider or something. It might take a month. You're not working on these full apps all by yourself. And so I don't know, it's good to get a hang of it. Like, oh, I get it. There's a database. You can save stuff to it. You can retrieve stuff to it. I mean, but this idea, you're going to learn 3 full stacks. No, you're not. You're going to get introduced to them. And then, I mean, if you close your computer for 3 weeks, you won't remember anything probably. So to me, I just want the students to be able to prove their value in whatever way that is. And I think in some ways that's going to be being a project manager. Somebody might just really want to set up the Trello and get a group of the students like all through it. And now they know the code. So they know like, oh, you're having a problem with this. Oh, well, I kind of know a little bit about that. Or let's ask Jesse, maybe he knows how to do it. Or, let's just reorganize who's working on what. Like, you're really good with Flexbox. Why don't you go work on it? Or, just being able to do little prototypes or being able to do UX. I mean, I don't think we need any more people who just spit out balsamic mockups anymore. We need people who can sit down, talk to the client, talk to the users, build little prototypes, turn it back over to them and be like, what about this? Does this work better? That's the kind of thing we need, because it's expensive, man. You get 10 developers in a room, that's $1 million right there, isn't it? Like $100,000. That's like, if you better be doing something worth millions of dollars. Otherwise, nobody's going to pay. Nobody pays you unless they make 10 times as much off of you. So if you're not making a company $1 million, just think about that. Why are they giving you $100,000? And when they go out of business, you're gone. Like, it's that too. Like, I want people to build their own businesses, and I want people to like really invest in their economy and see how they can actually be a source for change of local businesses and things like that. Like, we can't all just have these overarching companies and Postmates and all these companies with just kind of like, in COVID right now, think of all the money. They could have hired the dishwashers they had to fire to drive the food around, and the dishwashers would probably make 3 times as much money. So I don't know what's going on, but we need people to be more thinkers, and we need people who aren't just doing what the boss says, because you get 20 guys in different rooms doing what the boss says, and then what do you get? You get a bunch of trash and people spying on you and all these horrible things happening that I don't know. I want people to be designers. I want them to design a better future. And if they just get jobs, that's fine too.
Okay. So I just like the way you think. I like your perspective. I kind of just like listening. That's why I've been letting you elaborate on time. No, this is good. This is what I want to hear.
I should have used like a little time timer or something, and then I could have
So I think your program, I'm going to summarize quite a bit here. So here's my summary. I think your program is a lesson in, a lot of times coding boot camps will spit out people that are introduced to multiple frameworks, and like the focus is on marketability, what they can put on their resume versus what they know. And a lot of coding boot camps will claim like, yeah, we're going to really teach you the fundamentals well. But to me, it just feels like a lot of fluff. It just feels like a lot of sales pitches. And then when I look at their curriculum, it's like they're getting exposure after exposure after exposure, but they're not really diving deep into the fundamentals. They're not understanding why they need to even learn a framework in the first place. And it feels like your program like really beats that into you. Like from start to finish, and like you start with like really basic fundamental stuff of like even just like, I think the simplest website you said was like building out like a business card website. That's way better to keep it that simple versus like, a lot of people will build their portfolios with React, and it's like, why? And so you're teaching people to think about why. And that's like, honestly, a lot of companies do want to bring in developers that have thought about this, have like made, like actual decisions to bring in this framework based on it solving a real problem, not just because someone told them to learn it. And your coding bootcamp, or, not a coding bootcamp, whatever you want to label it as, like it teaches, it really instills this mindset. And I think that's one of the one things that attracts me to your program. Now, it wouldn't be my podcast if I didn't touch on this as well. So I'm going to give you a perspective, of my experience as a software engineer. And like I said, I've interviewed, thousands of people going into positions and talked to a lot of hiring managers. And so I have a really good understanding of like what a lot of positions are looking for right now when they're trying to hire software engineers. So I'm going to poke a couple of holes in it that I don't think they're really holes, because I think your program is a little bit different. But I'm just going to say like some challenges that people are going to face. Like it's like a 6-month program. And very often I see, unless like it's part-time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really only asking for 2 to 3 hours of focus a day, and it could be at your own pace during that day. We have to keep up.
Okay, all right, sounds good.
You can do more.
Yeah, and I think you even give like supplemental work for people to kind of like expand on that a little bit too. But with a part-time program, 6 months, you're honestly starting to teach people what a lot of coding boot camps lack. My concern is your time frame. Being able to shove this into a part-time program within 6 months, it's like you're really focused on a lot of good things. And that's why I really believe in your program. But as far as like producing competitive software engineers, where quite frankly, a lot of companies do want them to pick up this framework. They do want them, like they do have, for whatever reason, they're still doing these data structures and algorithms tests. And a lot of like hiring processes are broken. But the reason why I like really push this mindset of like, this is what you have to learn. It's kind of a stupid reason why they have to learn this stuff, but they still have to be competitive. They still have to like think in terms of, like data structures and algorithms and how to make things more efficient. Especially you get this big attraction to top tech, big tech that are doing tons of interviews in this way. And like I said, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I personally think the hiring processes are broken a lot. And I think people really need to understand, like when they're thinking, oh, I want to work at Facebook, I want to work at Google. Like, do you really want to work at Facebook? I don't think you actually know. And so, but, a lot of these, and then a lot of other companies will adapt these kind of hiring policies. And I think, hiring managers are just trying to make things more efficient because, it takes a long time to bring someone in. It takes a long time to interview. And in my opinion, that's why a lot of these are introduced, like a lot of whiteboard problems and coding challenges online, because it just makes the process easy. They're able to, they'll have data in front of them to compare applicants. It just like, because every hiring manager that I've ever had, every boss, they were overworked. Every single one of them. They cared about the product. I was lucky to have really good bosses. And quite frankly, you brought up this idea of, well, like, you have, I don't know how many engineers, we're just going to use the number 10. You have 10 engineers that are listening to a single boss and, they're just doing what he says. Well, like, that's more work on your boss. Like, you are brought in to bring in ideas. You are brought in to challenge things. You are brought in to even challenge a process, not in obnoxious ways. There's a time and a place, but like you are brought in to think for yourself and like introduce, like really maybe kind of a more efficient process around this, maybe better documentation around this, and, maybe like a better process with working with designers in this area. Like most bosses want you to come in with just being critical thinkers and not just being yes man or yes woman, like I think a lot of hiring managers are hiring for that now, which is good to see because they want to take that off their plate. But one thing, like one challenge I see is when you do kind of shy away from these frameworks and you do kind of shy away from more complex problems. And I don't think it's hurting people to shy away from frameworks, but I think there's going to be a challenge in like with the 6 months, only 6 months that you have that you're going over all this other fundamental stuff, you're probably not getting into complex algorithms. You're not getting into complex architecture. You're not getting into, like you said, you're not diving into, like if someone wants to become a backend developer, it helps to get that exposure to connect their app with AWS. A lot of companies will, look highly on something like that. But, on the flip side, as a developer, I think it's really just a problem with our hiring processes, because as a developer, like I'm not going in my first position, I wasn't touching authentication. I wasn't touching like the structure, like the production part of our app, like right away. I wasn't trying to like optimize the pipeline of like, this very, very expensive app. I think it's healthy to teach developers, like give them exposure. And, but I don't know. So I'm kind of torn. Like I love the fundamentals that you're teaching, but, and this is actually, maybe I'm not torn because this is kind of what you want to do. You are shaping the audience that you want to bring into your program. And like you do this through things like no programmers. And there was another statement, like you don't want to bring in people that are boring. Those are actually like bold statements. And so you're bringing in people that want to be creative. But that's going to push away for people that, that do like during times of COVID that probably are only willing to spend that amount of money for an outcome that's going to give them a certain outcome. And if they're trying to become software engineers, especially like leaning more towards the back end, I feel like you're going to produce very strong front end developers versus back end developers. And that's just where your program leans in the time that you have. So you spit out a lot of information.
I think I made some notes. I think there's a few things going on. First of all, let's look at just the field, right? We have computer science graduates. They spend 4 years. I haven't checked all of them, but in the like hundreds I've met, they're always kind of waiting for, if they went there in the hopes of learning web like applications, they're waiting, and then at the end they get like basically a 4-month project in their 4th year. And then they come back. I talked to somebody the other day for hours about how he might want to do our program. And he'd already gone to computer science school and then a boot camp and was still not feeling confident. Luckily, I was able to, I'm not trying to sell him on that. Like I just talked him through it and, said, well, can you go through the book Exercises for Programmers? Because if you can make it through that book with whatever language you want, it's language agnostic, like you are a great programmer and you're ready for the field, but you need to start, thinking about it a little differently. Now, coding bootcamp people, I meet a lot of them, talk to them in person, look over their code, try to help them with their, I go kind of lurk around Career Karma and stuff like that. And I sometimes end up helping them rebuild their React site into an HTML site so that, the recruiters can actually see they know how to write 2021 semantic code and stuff like that. And it's like if I don't need to make like a comparison, but if you're talking about whether they're commercially viable, they can't make, everyone I've talked to so far who went to a React heavy bootcamp could not do anything without React to any competency. And our students are going to be able to do that within the first 4 weeks, I would say. So it sounds fluffy, but it's the fact that we're not letting them do anything else, that we're not letting them get overwhelmed, that we're only delivering one concept a day that's just enough that it almost seems stupid. Like this is all you're letting me do today is learn how to just write 100 variables or, but it's not that we're learning how to write a variable. It's that we're redefining what that means. It's a piece of thing in memory with a reference. Then you point the reference somewhere else. That thing disappears. You're not saving it in a box. So there's all these misconceptions and things. And so I think that our people are going to be just as good or better. I think better suited. And I think you can learn React in 2 weeks. I learned Vue in 2 weeks. It's once you know what you're looking for, and we just talk about how to read the docs. Like I never talk about anything without going over the Mozilla Developer Network, like function signature. Like nothing ever happens. I mean, the computer I start the course with is like all the way blank. There's nothing installed on it except the video software. So nothing about the process is hidden or truncated. It's how do you write Stack Overflow? How do you write a good question? When is it time to ask on Discord versus Stack Overflow? Like, how do you formulate your question? All those things are just little micro things that add up. Like, do you even know how to use your computer? Because if I come over to your computer and you got 300 tabs open and you can't find anything and the code's all over the place and you don't know how to like manage your windows, you're costing a lot of money. No, it doesn't matter if you're the best programmer in the world, if you're a pain in the ass and nobody wants to like work with you. So I think at the end of the day, these CodePen projects, and we encourage people to write early. So they're writing technically about their work. They're building these blogs. They're building their thought process. And like, if I came into your office right now to get hired and you gave me an algorithm test, I would say, listen, I know what your company does. I've been researching it. This, and this. Here's where I think I can provide value. There's definitely no algorithms being written here. And if you want to give me an algorithm test, I won't waste any more of your time, because that is a mess. And nobody's going to change it if we don't change it. If we don't stop accepting that stuff, we need to go to more punk rock people. There's people there's people out there hooking people up with jobs who are cool. And there's a lot of people out there. It's like, at the end of the day, you want to work with somebody who you're going to get along with. Like, I know that people are giving the algorithm tests, but there's tons of jobs out there. I got my first job at like a little design shop, and it was just whatever. They thought they thought I could help them because I knew more about responsive design, but they thought this guy's not going to be a pain in the ass. It's sorry, I don't know if you have to bleep that.
Probably.
But
it's okay,
I think this is what we do. We ask people what they want at the beginning of the course. It's going to change. We get their like laser focused positioning statement, like Jonathan Stark style, like built out throughout the course. And at the end, they've picked out the job they want. They've built the portfolio to get that job. And I think they're just going to go get it, but we'll find out. And I would love to talk to you about it, or I'd love you to talk to some of the like a 6 months later group of people or something, because I really think that it's right there. The things you want in life are there. And I've spent so much of my life just not taking it, but it's there. Just pick what you want, do the work, and get it. That's what I think.
Okay. Like I said, you have a very unique approach to this. It's refreshing. I would love to take a look like 6 months later to see how it goes. This is something, the only reason I brought you on versus other people is because this sounds really interesting and I want to see what happens with it. So I'll be in touch for that for sure.
Yeah.
You're
welcome to like audit one of the classes. In each session, I have a like 20-year vet in there checking things out. I have, people I want to hire. Nobody is allowed to work for us who hasn't gone through the entire program. And, there's just some people who want to check it out. And so, you're welcome to kind of jump in there and follow along and see what's happening.
I love it. I appreciate that. All right. Well, so for people that, have listened to you and really empathize with your perspective on, becoming or getting into this industry, what other details could you provide where they could follow up, where they could join any, maybe like upcoming cohorts or anything like that? Do you have anything coming up?
Yeah, well, we have this sort of student screener thing on our website. So you could go to perpetual.education, not perpetual.education.com. And you can fill it out, and then you could just meet me and Ivy. I mean, I guess we should also just say that Ivy has taken a much bigger part in the company. She's my partner in crime here. She's not here today. And she's the one who actually reached out to you, because I was watching your video and she's like, why don't you just talk to him? So, we meet us and we talk to people and we give advice, and we're not going to try to talk you into going to our school. There's lots of schools. We think there should be lots of schools, like smaller schools, and that everybody should be learning from each other and, sharing some information about what's working at the different schools. The goal is not to be the only school. And So anyway, you could just talk straight to us. I hope that one day we're not so flooded that we can't speak to people personally anymore, but we can help you organize your goals and really just, sometimes people are already got a lot of it worked out and a few books might do the trick, right? Or they're going from computer science college and they just they're just a little bit insecure, or it all depends. So you can talk straight to us. That's for one thing. Then as far as cohorts, we have one starting in May and July. And so, there's no way to get into it without talking to us because it's got to work for us, got to work for you. And pricing wise, we started out with this like $10,000 model. And we just thought we're just going to do it. There's thousands and thousands of people who were going to go to computer science college during COVID who definitely shouldn't. Like, the money's out there. We'll work out some ways to make it more affordable after we get rolling, but these people, but COVID just was too intense. So we spent some time, we actually postponed one of the first dates, and we set up an ISA. And so our ISA, there's a couple different options and we can sometimes change them depending on your situation. But the lowest entry point is $2,500 upfront. And we want you to have a Mac. We can talk about that later. And then the ISA is 9% for 24 months. So it's definitely the lowest ISA, I think there is. And then there's another option. Let's say you already make $90,000 and you want to pivot from your project manager role to visual design. You might not all of a sudden make $20,000 more or whatever. Like, you might be just sort of, jumping parallel. You could pay $5,000 up front and then just pay 5% of your salary, or you could just pay 10 and get it out of the way, which a lot of people do. So there's options there, and we've been able to help people out in different ways. And it's really, don't let the money scare you. Usually we can figure it out, and so it's more important you just get the conversation going. And like I said, we'll happily give you a curriculum that you can just take and do yourself, and offer you some suggestions, get some buddies. Here's the 3 books. Here's 10 projects, stuff like that. Our goal is to be helpful, and when the people are the right people for our program, then we'll work together.
I love it. No, I absolutely love that. And you said it right. There are a lot of coding boot camps, and I want to see if coding boot camps are going to keep popping up. I want to see them do something differently. I'm tired of seeing every coding boot camp try to compete with each other over the same things. I think this is really unique. Check it out. If it's for you, reach out to Derek and Ivy. Have that conversation. If it's not, choose another coding boot camp. That's exactly what Derek's telling you. And I love that. So yeah, Derek, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience with this. Kind of just learning how you became a developer is unique on its own, but I appreciate you sharing your program with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.